Hey, I'm still working on the quick integration with RxJS, so don't worry, that is coming. But today I listened to the Builder.io stream about signals in Quick and Quick Beta, and yeah, that was really interesting. But there's one part of it that bugged me and made me want to write an article and upload a video to YouTube as well. And that is the part about signals and RxJS. And I don't know if you go listen to the live stream or look at the comments. I couldn't see the live chat for some reason. It seems like it's not available. At least it wasn't on my phone. But I was pretty obnoxious in the live chat. I had probably 5 comments about RxJS, and they finally addressed it. And I wasn't really satisfied with what they said. I get it. I get why Quick can't support it, because Quick needs to support. It needs something to be serializable in order for it to really fit Quick's philosophy, and that's what I'm working on with this stuff. But I took this detour because I keep hearing this. I keep seeing it on Twitter, and I keep hearing in random like YouTube videos that like fine-grained reactivity has nothing to do with RxJS, and RxJS, they're mutually, or they're not even like competing for the same space. That fine-grained reactivity is just synchronous, and it has nothing to do with async stuff. And obviously that's wrong, because RxJS, the map operator, is synchronous, and RxJS is a way for a value to react in a fine-grained way to another value. So RxJS is definitely fine-grained reactivity in the same way, but signals, they're really, really popular right now. Preact and Quick, within the last month, both announced support for signals. I think Preact already has it. Quick, it's coming up soon. It's really exciting, but it's not enough. It's not enough for reactivity. And so if you're used to React, you might come at the fine-grained reactivity concept from an angle of performance, because React is like, it's actually weird. Like vanilla JavaScript is nothing like React. With React, everything is constantly re-rendering all the time. And the unique thing is when something is permanent, when it stays the same. But vanilla JavaScript is the opposite. You've got HTML, and you've got the DOM, and then JavaScript on top of it making things happen dynamically. So actually, with vanilla JavaScript, you have great performance. But the issue is vanilla JavaScript is imperative. That's the entire reason these frameworks were invented, was to get things to bind. That means react. So, yeah, the point of reactivity is not performance. Vanilla.js has performance. Reactivity is actually about code organization. Reactivity lets you organize your code by what it depends on, rather than what it is going to change. So it's declarative. So it declares its own behavior instead of relying on scattered code among callbacks and event handlers to update it. Okay, so, and there's like this famous React hooks demo that everyone has probably seen, where you've got on one side how React used to be with lifecycle hooks like Angular still has, where things are based on when they run. So your code is organized by when it runs, and each feature is interested in a little bit of that. Like a feature has to have behavior when the component mounts, when it's about to unmount, things like that. And so you'll see the features logic scattered across these different callback functions. But with hooks, it allows you to co-locate the logic with the state it's changing. So that's pretty declarative. And in order to be completely declarative, you have to actually, after this, you have to extract it into some kind of hook where you've got like a pairing of state and an effect. And that allows you to abstract away those imperative updates, and it makes it internal. And then your code can actually be cleaner. So these red squares would be together and the yellow squares would be together. I'm actually really interested in Marco. When Yaroslav Lapin was talking with me, he mentioned Marco 6, and it enables even more co-location than this. So it would actually be inside the JXS. So we should actually be highlighting this red and yellow as well. So it still is pretty scattered, but yeah, so that is interesting. Something I'm looking forward to. Anyway, that's not the point of this. It's the next step, hopefully. Hopefully we get there. Marco 6 looks awesome. We'll see. But the idea is hooks are actually really reactive. Because they allow your code to react in certain ways. And if you look inside the use effect, it really isn't running unless the things it depends on are changing. So it is reactive, or it's part of what can be reactive with a use state. Anyway, but synchronization is not enough. Everybody's talking about synchronization and that being the primary issue of reactivity, but it's not the primary issue of reactivity. It's a very, very common one. So I guess you could call it the primary issue, but it's not everything. Since it's about code organization, why wouldn't you want that for async reactivity as well? Async behavior. So there's this other example that I have in an article I wrote for Angular. I'm going to have the link to this article in the description for this video, and then you can click on all the links from this article. But anyway, so with if you just have solid signals, you can't have this co-location because they only handle synchronous reactivity. What you need is to create a custom hook, just like with React you can do. So you can build on top of these things, but out of the box, you can't have async reactivity, but you get the exact same benefits with async reactivity as you do with synchronous reactivity. So separating it out as like synchronization as this special case of reactivity is, to me, not seeing the whole picture. You get there's no real distinction between synchronous reactivity and async reactivity if they're both about code organization. So, why isn't this idea of supporting async reactivity more popular? Well, it's because it's difficult. RxJS has 114 operators, and yeah, that is a lot to support. And granted, half of them are redundant and kind of for really syntactic sugar. But I have found unique uses for at least 30 of them that, without them, it would have been kind of annoying to implement. So, I would have had to write some imperative code probably. So there are a lot of utilities that are required because there are many ways that you can react asynchronously. With synchronous reactivity, it's just if that changes, we're gonna be that thing too. So just be that. That's really simple. Async reactivity is be that, but after a second, or maybe 2 seconds, or maybe ignore half of the changes. And it's very all the things you can do to an array are things you can do with async events over time. That's why people compare RxJS to Lodash. It's just a bunch of utilities you can perform over values over time. It's like an array that's where it's separated by time instead of memory or whatever an array is separated by. Anyway, so yeah. So just out of the box with solid.js, you can create a signal like this and synchronous reactivity. But in order to support async reactivity, you need a lot of custom hooks on top. And there are some, but not even React has enough. React doesn't support. I couldn't find a concat map custom hook for React. It's rare that you use it, but I don't know. Maybe there's one, but I couldn't find it. But anyway, so my point is with this whole article, yes, it's possible with all these hook libraries to support this declarative async code. because use effect and use state and whatever the equivalent is in these other libraries, they are the primitives that you can build on top of and support all these reactive patterns. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done still if you're going to actually, write a real application. So RxJS isn't like some kind of ultimate solution for me. To me it's a means to an end, and the end is code that's organized neatly. So it's self-contained, it's declarative. So if something's wrong, you look at the thing instead of all the other callback functions or whatever that might touch it. So since it's a means to an end, I'm not like married to it. I just see extreme value in being able to have all these utilities that let you immediately code reactively without having to create a ton of really complicated async logic. So I see it as like a temporary solution. For React, it does have a place, because I wrote an article about RxJS or React not needing RxJS. And then I wrote another article where I was trying to implement every RxJS operator in React hooks. And after 38, I was having a good time. But I noticed that there were kind of repeating themes that felt like they deserved a lot more thought and attention. And I think tan-stack query can evolve to become a more elegant solution to handle more general async patterns than it does now. Because right now it stores the queries by key, and then in order to do canceling, so if you have a type ahead and you type a bunch of things, it will maintain those requests to the server for fetching items for the search. But it does support canceling. It does support like a switch map type thing. There's just a special syntax for it. But with RxJS, it's as easy as just swapping out. Oh, we had concat map before. Let's do switch map now, or merge map, or whatever. Like, they're equivalent, and I wish they were treated that way in tan-stack query, and I believe over time they might be, because RxJS didn't start with all of its operators. Over time, it evolved too, by demand, I'm sure. Maybe some of it was like some abstract imagining what could be useful. But at some point, the world will open up, I feel like, of these different async patterns, and tan-stack query will start solving that problem. Where was I? Right, but it's going to take a while for that to happen. And in the meantime, we have RxJS now. So if you're in a React app and you're like, oh man, I wish that like this async pattern was a little easier to deal with. I wish tan-stack query supported this strange like parallelization like pattern or whatever. Think about RxJS and see if they have an operator, and it's not that hard to use in React. So speaking of how easy it is to use in React, I made this graph. It's not objective. This is my perspective of how well RxJS is handled in different frameworks. So Svelte is the top one. It is so nice. You just put a $sign there, and because Svelte stores had the same signature, just about signature. Use that for functions. API, it had the same interface, whatever. And so that was really a happy accident, but it's awesome. Svelte, like RxJS in Svelte, is really smooth. Solid.js, you have to call a function, and then it returns it as a signal, and then you can use a signal. So, I mean, it's fine, but it eagerly subscribes. And in my experience, it was good, but not great. And then you have Angular that was, Angular is not that great. I have a lot to say about Angular, but for now I'll just say async pipe is awkward with the template, and reusing things. The ngIf trick is annoying. Angular never took advantage of finding any reactivity with RxJS, and the performance, the async pipe just flags the component and says, hey, something changed in this component. Let's do change detection for this entire lineage of components. And yeah, I don't know. RxAngular is amazing. RxAngular has the RxLet directive or the push, Rx push, that actually is basically fine-grained reactivity in Angular with RxJS. So yeah, use that. And then React, I mean, there's no like out-of-the-box support at all for RxJS, but it's not too hard to create. So I gave it a 3. And then Quick is basically non-existent because, Quick is new. I'm working on this. Hopefully Ben Lesh is working on it. Mishko Hevery challenged him to work on it. So let's see what happens if he can create a serializer for Quick, for RxJS and Quick. That would be awesome. But I'm working on something, and like I said, I will publish a video about that soon. It's complicated, but anyway. So with Angular, it's got those problems I mentioned, but overall the ecosystem is pretty nice. I love how many state management libraries just love RxJS. If you care about state management, it's pretty good chance that you care about RxJS too. They're solving the same problem. I mean, like, some of them do a better job of it than others, but anyway, in general, the ecosystem for RxJS and Angular is awesome. But I feel like I kind of want to read this verbatim because I spent a lot of time on the wording. You won't think I spent that much time on the wording because it's not super nice or tactful. It is kind of, I just spent time trying to express my raw emotion as purely as possible, my raw thoughts. So let me hang on. So the first thing that bugs me is the fact that Angular is working on a new reactive primitive. We already have RxJS. Why are we coming up with a new primitive? So my guess is that the Angular team is feeling insecure about Angular because Angular hasn't done as well as other frameworks in like popularity contests with like surveys with other front end frameworks, and they think that RxJS is a primary culprit in that problem. I think the issue is actually two things. One is the integration with every aspect of Angular that RxJS could touch sucks. The exception would be like route parameters, which is, it just was, RxJS was used because if you can have an observable of a route parameter, you don't have to reload a route or anything. You can just update little things inside the component and not redo the route or anything. So that's pretty good. But component inputs, their values that change over time, why aren't they observables? Lifecycle hooks, why are they imperative callback functions instead of observables you can react to? The async pipe, not really performant, even though it lets you do on-push change detection, which is at least some improvement. And then just the awkwardness of using it in the template. There's a lot of, basically nothing is great with like, and it's weird. They have outputs as observables for components, but not inputs. In reactive forms, same thing. Events go up, data goes down. Events are like single values. They're things that happen at a time, and you can describe them as observables, but what's more important is the state coming down. So yeah, that is the first problem I think that causes people to hate RxJS. They hate, like people are like this. Like they don't exactly blame the right things sometimes. If you own a business and there are sketchy people that hang out outside the building and your customers are hassled every time they go to your business, they're going to rate your business as not great. Like you will get lower ratings. Like look at the reasons people rate things lowly. Like if the overall experience of using something is terrible, they're going to blame the thing. And with RxJS and Angular, They see that you don't have to use RxJS and Angular, and when they don't use it, they have a better time with Angular. That isn't necessarily RxJS's fault. So that is one thing that I think is actually behind the dislike of RxJS and Angular. The other issue is thinking reactively. A lot of people have been trained to think imperatively, and I honestly think that declarative thinking is the way that people naturally think until they learn programming, where you can use both in different situations, but basically with declarative programming, if something's wrong, then it's declared incorrectly. In imperative programming, if something's wrong, then you don't know where the code with the problem is. It could be in a click handler. It could be in a function the click handler calls. So there's like this symmetry where with imperative programming, you have callbacks referencing a lot of things and changing them. With reactive programming, you have features that reference a lot of things and react to them. And when everything is organized by feature, your short-term memory is loaded with relevant facts that are, about that feature. And so you can make better decisions about how to incorporate a new event or something. With imperative programming, you have something that happened, and you have to remember what each feature is that you need to update. And sometimes you have to do some weird coordination. You have to think like, what else is updating this? You have to do annoying out of context thinking. So, declarative programming is easier to reason about. But people have been trained with imperative programming, and so they have to override habits, and a lot of people aren't used to that. But over time, web development has trended towards more reactivity. Angular was a step towards more reactivity with data binding. That's DOM reaction. React is about React. It's the DOM reacts. It's fairly imperative overall, but with hooks, it can be more reactive. And Tanstack query, it is becoming more popular and more capable, and they're implementing other libraries, which is interesting, other frameworks. So there's like this slow and kind of bumpy trend towards more and more reactivity. And, you even see like React or Solid.js being inspired by Knockout's reactivity. And, these things, it will just keep being more and more reactive because the web isn't getting less interactive. The web is getting more interactive. I don't know why WebSockets aren't used more. Personally, real-time is awesome. WebSockets are more efficient. But anyway, so the more asynchronous your application is, the more asynchronous reactivity matters. So every step has been more or less towards higher levels of reactivity. So I think that these two problems people have with RxJS and Angular are solvable or temporary. So I don't like that they are stepping away from RxJS. It seems like the Angular team thinks that people are bothered by the RxJS syntax itself, which makes no sense. So they're proposing like an alternative that isn't that different. Let me show you. Yeah, look at this. This is what I saw. Things probably changed since then, but the point is, with RxJS alone, you can so if people are bothered by RxJS's syntax, and then they don't see the benefit of async reactivity because they're not used to thinking reactively, they think that maybe the only reactive problem you need to solve is synchronous reactivity. And so they think that, an alternative to RxJS will be adequate if it just handles that. And that's what this is. It's just synchronous reactivity. But RxJS does synchronous reactivity. It's called the map operator. And you can create whatever operator you want. And it, you can memoize it and just call, memo if you want. But like this it's actually shorter syntax, just because computer map. I mean, that's the main difference. But the idea is like, if all you're trying to do is support synchronous reactivity, then you don't need RxJS pipe syntax. You can just do a one-liner, and then what you have is comparable. So people are comparing this simple synchronous reactivity to RxJS, like typical RxJS, which involves async stuff with multiple operators, and this looks nice, and the typical RxJS looks more complicated, but it can be written like this. So really, you are creating something that is no different from this. Sure, the internals are going to be different. Maybe it can be more performant, but people are already familiar with RxJS. Do you really think that the people who don't like RxJS and Angular are going to love this, but hate this? They're almost identical. If people don't like RxJS itself, it's probably the integration. If they don't like reactivity, then they aren't used to it. Their expectations are different from how you're supposed to organize your code with reactive programming. So Angular has had an amazing opportunity to take advantage of RxJS. It's been with the framework since the beginning, of Angular 2, 2015, 2016. So why don't they see that the map operator is synchronous reactivity and that Angular developers already are familiar with it? And so why don't they just take advantage of that and support it better? It's because I think they're insecure. They're really insecure about RxJS, and they don't know exactly what it is, so they want to step back from it completely. I don't like that. I think RxJS is amazing, and if you love RxJS, you want to know exactly what problem people have with it, because you want to keep as much as you can from it. I think that, I don't know. I'm just going to move on. So basically, Angular has had the best opportunity to take advantage of RxJS, and they've dropped the ball the hardest. They could have done fine-grained reactivity with performance and created an incredibly performant framework. But they're like, it seems like they're abandoning it. Whatever the reactive primitive they come up with, I doubt it's going to have as nice integration as even Svelte with RxJS, because with Svelte you're not interacting with a primitive. You just the framework just knows that there's a thing that you can subscribe to. So I don't even know if they're going to get as good support as Solid has, because Solid is really good with RxJS integration. It'll probably be equivalent to what Solid has. But I think that what's gonna happen is Angular is gonna run with its own reactive primitive, and it's going to find out that nothing really changed in the ecosystem. People still hate RxJS because people are still using RxJS for asynchronous stuff, because the synchronous reactivity doesn't it's inadequate to support reactive code for asynchronous stuff. And they're going to realize, you know what, not much actually changed. We could have actually done this with RxJS, and people, the same people who hate RxJS, they're like gonna kind of be okay about this new reactive primitive, because it's as if you're using RxJS but only the map operator. And for these people, the less reactivity, the better. So they're gonna prefer it just because it's just the map operator essentially. So, but in the end, the passionate people in Angular are mostly passionate about RxJS, and there are a few really outspoken, passionate people against RxJS. But I feel like Twitter Angular is much more RxJS friendly. So we're still gonna have heavy RxJS use, but it's not gonna be first class citizen in the Angular framework. So it's like, I don't think anything's going to change with this synchronous reactive primitive. I really don't think anything is going to change, really. It's just more syntax to learn. That's basically what it is. I don't know. Maybe there might be like more performance. If they have more control over it, they can optimize performance better. But yeah. Anyway, so I was kind of I had a lot of negativity about Angular in this section of the article. So oh well, but it just feels like for years we've been promised better RxJS integration, and it never came. Like honestly, RxJS and TypeScript are the two reasons I love Angular, and everybody kind of is supporting TypeScript now, and RxJS support is better in Svelte and solid. TypeScript isn't really in Svelte templates yet, but it wasn't even Angular templates until like 2 or 3 years ago. But anyway, so yeah, I'm like not feeling happy about Angular right now. But you know, I don't really care. My goal is to write declarative async code, and RxJS is awesome for that. So whatever library supports RxJS the best or has a really good ecosystem of async declarative utilities like tan stack query, that's going to be my favorite framework. Right now, SolidJS is overall my favorite framework, but Quick is awesome too. So we'll see. Anyway, and then this paragraph. This is my most critical paragraph, right at the end of the Angular section. I'll just read it. And for some reason, the Angular team is currently inspired by Svelte stores, which are basically a less capable version of behavior subject. Instead, they should be inspired by the fact that Svelte accidentally has better support for a library that Angular's core depends on than Angular does. Isn't that incredible that Svelte accidentally has better support for RxJS than Angular? Kind of pisses me off. And there's nothing to be inspired by with Svelte stores. Absolutely nothing. Behavior subjects are the same thing, but better and extensible with pipes and operators. It's, yeah, the support that Svelte has for the stores. Angular could have that. Anyway, so finally, next, React. I already talked about this a little bit, but yeah, it has the best declarative alternatives to RxJS, but it's not all the way there. So RxJS can be handy in React still. And then finally, Quick. Quick is an amazing framework. I love performance. I love fast websites. I hate as a user waiting for things to load, waiting for things to happen when I click, jolty UIs with like really bad performance. I want super fast runtime and super fast load time and clean code. I want all of those things. So I'm really working hard to get Quick working or RxJS working in Quick. So basically what I have is I've changed my approach from my last video where I asked if it was possible to use RxJS in Quick. Instead of loading the entire pipeline up front, I'm changing it because if you really want something that's truly Quick friendly, you got to have something that loads the operator code, which isn't trivial, and your code inside of the operator lazily. So if a user clicks a type ahead, it loads the behavior, or they type in a type ahead. It loads the behavior subject and the debounce lazily. And it's not until the debounce is finished that it loads that it has to have the filter or switch map operators. Because when a user starts typing, they could immediately have the debounce start running instead of waiting for all that other code to load too. So it just fits the Quick's philosophy of just incremental loading of different code. So what that means is I have to break each RxJS segment into its own RxJS chain with its own internal subscription. and I have to track that subscription inside a quick store. And when you split it up in a more fine-grained way like this, it also opens the possibility that you could serialize it and at least resume the async behavior at one of those operators at the beginning of one of them. So you have like 10 delay operators in a row. Maybe if you pause the application after the 8th one and resume it, it would start off at the 8th one and go from there. Not only that, but it also opens up an interesting possibility where you can create a thing called switch map $, like a custom quick hook that internally calls switch map. And then beyond that, since they have independently managed subscriptions, what you could do is swap out the RxJS implementation if you wanted to. But I don't see why you would need to, because if it's this easy to use RxJS and quick, it should be possible. But there are complexities I'm still figuring out, like what if a stream completes? Like what if it's an of? So on the server, you subscribe and it's propagating subscription data into the quick stores at each level. What if it completes? Like what happens there? Do we get rid of the subscriptions? Yeah, I think you would. Yeah, so I'm going to just try the straightforward solution and do a finalize and decrement count, subscribe count if that happens. But anyway, I'm working on it and it's complicated, and I have to commit the stuff I did last time and just sort of set that aside as maybe a backup plan if I can't get this new thing to work. But I hope I can get this new thing to work. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And man, I'm sorry about the negativity about Angular, but man, so frustrated. That issue, there was an issue I linked to in the article about implementing observable or component inputs as observables. That issue was open in 2015. It was in the top 5 of most liked issues in the history of Angular. And at one point, Mishko Hevery's like, yeah, we'll get to this or something like that. And there were like little other things that sounded like, yeah, they'd get to it. Like Rob Wormold or early on was like, yeah, but after Ivy maybe. So this won't happen until after Ivy. And so, yeah, I literally waited years for Angular to get a better RxJS integration. And we tried to create our own things. Like there were like 6 of us. I published one library for a decorator that could turn an input into an observable, but there were issues with it. There are bugs. There's a comment explaining it. Like all of them were hacky, and there was no way to do it without getting into the framework itself. So, yeah, frustrating times. But anyway, I have confidence though that every framework is trending towards higher and higher levels of reactivity. And in the meantime, RxJS is a great way to bridge the gap. So, yeah. All right.